Then we will open for discussion among the committee. And if there's time, we will move to public input on the bills today. But today is a hearing only for that reason, but so the committee can ask questions of the presenter first because at the end of the day, that's what's needed today to know, be knowledgeable of the content of both bills. If we get to that point, we will get to that point. If we do not, sadly, but we will have these bills back because this is just a hearing only. And then at that time, we'll make sure that people have ample opportunity to speak to the bills. So having said that, I will call on my friend and brother, Senator Jackson. Would you please open us up in a word of prayer?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Let's bow our heads. Dear Lord, our Heavenly Father, we come today to say thank you. We come today to bless this state, bless this country, Lord, bless His people. Lord, let us do your will this day, Lord. Guide our hearts to do what's good for Georgia. Lord, guide our hearts to do good for its children. Lord, help us make this a better state. Lord, as we go through these proceedings today and hear legislation, but more importantly, we hear the word of you, Lord. Help us, Lord. Guide us, Lord. Let us do best for your people. These and other blessings. Dear Heavenly God, we all say amen.
Amen. Thank you. All right. Today we will be hearing Senate Bill 15 from Senator Anderson. And just going for the record, that's LC 490278. And also Senate Bill 377 by Senator Hatchett. And that number is LC 490750. And just to make sure everyone has the same. Is Senator Anderson here? She contacted me earlier and said that she may be a little bit late, so we may have to go with her second. Senator Anderson, is anyone here from Senator Anderson's office?
Yes.
Okay, then at this time, I will go ahead and call upon Senator Hatchett. Senator Hatchett, if you'll come to the table and please present to us Senate Bill 377 LC 490750.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee. Today I bring Senate Bill 377. As the chairman said, LC numbers 490750. And I kind of want to walk through the sections of the bill. I want to read the parts of the bill, the actual language, explain what it is, what it isn't, and if that's okay with the chairman.
Yes, please.
So since this bill was dropped, I've heard a lot in the media. I've heard a lot, have gotten several calls, have gotten a lot of social media attention. And one thing I want to open up and just say, I do believe we live in a wonderful country, the greatest country on earth. I believe we live in a wonderful state. But we're not perfect. And our history is checkered. Our history is stained with racism. Our history is stained with laws that were designed to be oppressive. Our history is stained with a civil war. And in no way, shape, or form is it my intention to prevent history from being taught to our students. And I want to say that from the very beginning. The things that we're trying to prevent from being taught are divisive concepts. And there's 9 that we have defined here. I look forward to and have enjoyed civil discourse with members on both sides of the aisle in both chambers of the Senate. I've spoken with members of higher education. I've had conversations with professors, with high schoolers or high school administrators, principals, you name it. And it's been refreshing that we are able to have civil discourse. So I want to just read these divisive concepts that we're trying to prevent from being taught. Number 1, a student should never be taught that one race or ethnicity is inherently superior to another race or ethnicity. That's number 1. I think everybody, the majority of Georgians would agree that you should not teach a student that because of the color of their skin, they're inferior or superior. Number two, that the United States of America and the state of Georgia are fundamentally or systematically racist. Number three, that an individual solely because of his or her race, skin color, or ethnicity is inherently racist or oppressive, whether consciously or subconsciously. So meaning just because of the color of my skin, you know, I have 3 daughters, and one day I would not want them to be taught, well, because you're Caucasian, because your skin is that color, you inherently are racist. And that's one of these divisive concepts that I think everyone should get on board with and would support. Number 4, an individual should be discriminated against or receive adverse treatment solely or partly because of his race or her race, skin color, or ethnicity. Once again, should we allow people to teach objectively that an individual solely or should be discriminated against or receive adverse treatment just because of the color of their skin, their race, or ethnicity? Absolutely not. The 5th concept, an individual's moral character is inherently determined by his or her race, skin color, or ethnicity. Their moral character determined by the color of their skin. Should that be taught? Absolutely not. Number 6, an individual, because of his or her race, skin color, or ethnicity, bears responsibilities for actions committed by other individuals of the same race, skin color, or ethnicity, whether past or present. This is also another dangerous concept, whether you're dealing with blaming individuals for the sins of their father, their mother. If your grandfather was a murderer in the past, should you be taught that because of the color of your skin and because your grandfather committed those crimes that you inherit those? Absolutely not. Number 7, an individual should feel discomfort, guilt, anguish, or any other form of psychological distress because of his or her race, skin color, or ethnicity. These are the concepts. There's 2 more. Meritocracy or traits such as hard work, ethic are racist or were created by individuals of a particular race to oppress individuals of another race. Or, number 9, any form of race or ethnic scapegoating or race or ethnic stereotyping. And these are the divisive concepts. They've been defined. They're in the bill. Once again, I have enjoyed working with both sides of the aisle on this. I've enjoyed working with members of academia, and we are going to continue to work and push forward and hopefully have a bill that everyone can agree to here. But those are the concepts. That's section 1. The second part I want to get to is what this bill does not do. And if you go down to line 70, I think this is important. That could clear up some of the confusion. It says nothing in this code section shall be construed to do any of the following. And one thing in particular I want to point out is this bill does not prohibit the use of curriculum that addresses topics of slavery, racial or ethnic oppression, racial or ethnic segregation, or racial or ethnic discrimination, including topics relating to the enactment and enforcement of laws resulting in such oppression, segregation, and discrimination. So we're not, like I said in my opening statements, we have painful stains in our government's past that have caused oppression, and there were laws that were made that were racist, and we're not trying to prevent the teaching of that. We are strictly focusing on those 9 divisive concepts that I talked about in the beginning. The last, big part of this bill is the implementation process and the punishment, I guess you would call, for those that do not comply. And I've had lengthy discussions with several members of the academia world regarding, the 10% cut in funding, regarding the appeals process. What we're trying to do, especially at the K-12 level, is have a local process where involved parties, we're not talking about somebody from another state that wants to file a complaint in the state of Georgia, and when they're not connected, we're talking about students of age, their parents, teachers, and we want to make sure you have to have that standing to even file a complaint, number one. Number two, if the complaint is not resolved, there is an appeal process. And I think, after talking to several members of the University System of Georgia, the school superintendents, there's some tweaking that we will have to do with this part of the bill. But I do I want the members of the committee to know we're going to be working on that, which is why, Mr. Chairman, I thank you for having a hearing only today where we can have debate and bring up issues that may or may not be in the bill, and hopefully we can come back with another hearing or maybe two more, I don't know, to end up with a final substitute and final version of the bill. But at this point, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to yield for questions.
All right. Before we open for questions, like I said, I just would like to remind everyone the one thing that, I hope I don't sound like a broken record, but I hope I do sound like a broken record. But this is about every child, K through 12 education, and if it's not about those of us in this room, but if we keep our focus on every child, K through 12, both rural and urban in Georgia, we can have adult conversations. And so let's just keep our minds there as we go through the questions and debate and discussion. And having said that, you have a question from Senator Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Hatchett, do you yield?
I do.
Senator Hatchett, good to see you today. Senator Hatchett, wouldn't you agree that most racist theories aren't taught K through 12?
Senator Jackson, yes, theory is actually not a part of public K through 12 education right now. Theory itself, yeah.
Thank you. But wouldn't you also agree that most racist theories aren't taught in higher ed, including adult and technical ed education?
Yes, I would agree that in most situations, you're right. And well, if it's okay, I actually, when I went through all the way through college, I never encountered critical race theory until I was in law school, but I did other theories. There's critical gender theory, critical race theory. Critical theory is a way to teach certain classes, particularly criminal law and law school. But yes, for the majority of classes that you do not see critical theory.
Okay. If the senator would also yield, wouldn't you also agree, sir, that most racist theory are really taught at home or in other environmental situations, and not in an educational system in any of Georgia's school, K through 12 or an adult ed?
I think you're onto something there. I think racism a lot of times is taught in the home, and it's a shame. I think it's getting better. We got a long way to go as far as that goes, but just to your point, no, I don't think that theory is taught in K through 12, and I think the majority of racists in this country probably learned it at the dinner table. Okay,
but I say all that to say, sir, but we do have superior racist theory taught in our K through in some K through 12 systems, and I'm gonna give you an example. When we have high school football games, when people show up with rebel flags, or they call themselves the rebels, or the Confederates, would you consider that racist, sir, or superior?
I think when you're dealing with school mascots, that's a hard question to answer. What I'm talking about right here is the divisive concepts that I went through one by one. I do see what you're saying, but I can't comment necessarily on that in particular.
Well, sir, if we want to get rid of all racist and divisive concepts, wouldn't you also want to include in this legislation getting rid of all racist symbols and racist symbols in our high school and our college systems? Because think of yourself being somewhere and someone calling themselves the Confederates, which symbolize a divisive entity that thought they were superior than another, or someone walking around with a Confederate flag because their school are the rebels. or coming out with a rebel yell. Would you consider that divisive? And that is also taught in our high schools, in some of our high schools, sir. You don't think that should be included?
I think when you start diving into that area, it can be very sensitive, because if you start completely banning certain things, I would be very hesitant in this legislation specifically, because one of the things that people think I'm doing is burning books, or preventing the teaching of Martin Luther King, preventing the teachings of the justice warriors and the civil justice movement in our state, or excuse me, civil rights movement. I think that's a piece of legislation that could be brought in the future. But as far as this goes, I'm just focusing on divisive concepts being taught to our students from the perspective that I laid out early on. But I would like to explore that further with you in another piece of legislation. But I think it would be, you'd have to craft it very specifically, because if you're trying to cut some things out, it could get difficult.
Okay, one last question, Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes.
Senator Hatcher, do you think enslaved people or ancestors from enslaved people can be racist, being the product of a oppressor?
I have seen racism in many forms throughout my life. I don't think it necessarily discriminates against anyone. So yes, I think that just about everyone has the capability of being racist.
Thank you. I'm gonna end it right there, Mr. Chairman.
Yes. Yeah, you go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Hatchett, thank you. Couple questions. I'm looking at lines 67 and 68. Can you please explain to us what responding in an objective manner and without endorsement for questions regarding specific divisive concepts raised by students means?
So one thing that this piece of legislation we want to make sure of is we're not stepping on censoring in any way, shape, or form. This is responding to if a student asked a specific question, a teacher can respond objectively without endorsement, meaning, I'm trying to think of a different way to explain that. Can you ask it in a different question, or how?
Well, who, so, okay. Can I break it down? I have like two subparts, I guess. So it's, in reading the bill, it seems like the teacher isn't supposed to teach about divisive concepts, but if they're asked a question about divisive concepts, they can answer it as long as it's objective and without endorsement. Is that correct?
Correct.
So you don't think that has internal conflicts?
I think what we're talking about is part of the curriculum in the beginning, that these divisive concepts cannot be taught as part of your curriculum. But if a question is asked about, if you can come up with a question that could be asked, I can help. I just can't think of a hypothetical.
I will, but let me, I'll ask you next, but first, before I get to that, who would decide what sort of standard would you be using, and would a teacher be expected to be able to adhere to when you're talking about without endorsement? Do they have to say, well, some people think it was bad that there was Jim Crow, but I'm not going to endorse either way? Can you speak to that before I get to the other question that you asked me to ask?
No, and I think that's a good point when you're phrasing that question specifically, and it's something that we're having open dialogue about. I'm glad you brought that up, and I'd like to talk further about it. I don't, this is a difficult bill. This is a difficult issue. And as I said in the very beginning, I don't think this piece of legislation is necessarily perfect as it is written right now. I want to go back to thanking the chairman for having a hearing today where we can have these questions. And, I've asked since the beginning of my press conference to have, if you have any specific issues about the bill, come to me. Let's talk this through. I look forward to working with you more on this. And I have heard from members of your party, and we've had very good discussions and have some good ideas that we're looking at moving forward. But, with that specific question, I'd be happy to talk about later.
So the bill is not necessarily done and baked in. It may have some issues. Is that what you're wanting to get feedback from folks and work to even rough spots that maybe just kind of don't work?
Well, I believe that's why we're having a hearing today
Okay.
too.
Okay, just,
We can
and
have these discussions.
back to the question that you asked. So how would a teacher address topics that touch on systemic racism? For example, efforts of African-American citizens to obtain GI benefits after World War II, or residential mortgages in formerly all white neighborhoods. I'm sure you're familiar with the concept of redlining.
I am.
So how would a teacher discuss those things?
In response to a question, or, I mean, those things.
Is that would those be forbidden topics, like up front? Would those be divisive topics? Like they wouldn't be allowed to teach about redlining?
You could teach about redlining, but when you say because your parents or your grandparents redlining because of the color of your skin, you inherited those things. I mean, when you go back and look at the 9 definitions of what the divisive concepts were, those are the things that those are the things that we want to prevent from being taught to our students.
But Senator, wouldn't you agree that when you look at 28 and 29, would you not agree that when you delve into things like redlining and Jim Crow, those are examples of de jure racism? I'm confused about how, I mean, I understand what you're saying about like saying to a white kid or a black kid, like, this is, you inherently have these traits, blah, blah, blah. But I'm a little more concerned about, like, you're saying you can't talk about systemic racism, but when you talk about things that were, only like 60, 70 years ago that were actually like de jure segregation, how are you supposed to completely escape the notion that we've had systemic racism? That's what I'm confused about.
Well, and then we do address that later on, because it says that this should not prohibit the use of curriculum that addresses racial or ethnic discrimination, including topics relating to the enactment and enforcement of laws resulting in such oppression, segregation, and discrimination. And I think redlining would fall within that provision right there on line 81, 82, and 83.
So, but would you contend that is not then systemic racism? And if so, how would you define it for the prohibition?
Historic systemic racism in the past, and these things that have come up. I mean, that is a carve out in the bill that we wanted to make sure teachers were not prevented from teaching
Can I ask
about
one more?
historical.
Okay, I think I understand. Just one more, and I want to obviously let others have a chance. I guess then what that brings up to me is that sounded like you're saying, yes, we will acknowledge that there was systemic racism, but we don't want there to be any sort of like endorsement that there is today. What about the sort of, okay, if you've had hundreds of years of systemic in-law racism and denied opportunities of education and economic opportunity to one race in particular, does it not strike you as anti-intellectual to sort of like pretend that that would all be erased in 50 years?
I'm sorry, I don't.
The point is, when you deny people of a certain race economic and educational opportunity for hundreds of years, there's going to be an impact to that. And if you try to say are you allowed to say that if you're a teacher, or does that go against number H and B? Because to me, it seems like it does.
I respect your intellect, and I respect. I know we've had very good conversations in the past. I think people can disagree on certain issues. However, I would like to continue these conversations because our intent is not to prevent teachers from having freedom in education. Our intent is to prevent these divisive concepts and what they are. And this is exactly why in my press conference to begin with, we got to define them. This is our first step at it, our first stab at it. And these are very tough questions. And I appreciate the senator's line of question here and would like to continue these conversations.
Thank you, Senator Hatchett.
All right. Senator Brass.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just kind of want to step in and kind of help the author out here because I worked on this bill before he took it over, and you know, I think one of the points that you're still allowed to teach history in this state. And even after this bill, you're still going to be able to allow history to be allowed to teach history as it happened. But what you're not going to be able to do is put it in groups. I mean, raise your hand in this room if you're a United States citizen. Everybody raise your hand if you're a citizen of this state. Okay. If we say the United States of America is fundamentally and systematically racist, that means you are fundamentally and systematically racist. And that is not the case. If we want to put things in groups, none of us in this room made any kind of fundamental or systematic racist laws since we've been here. I would like to think that. Maybe there are, maybe we haven't. All right.
Hold a second, please. Everyone needs to keep order and be quiet.
But the point
We're trying
is,
to have just honest debate and question up here. We don't need input, please.
the point I'm trying to make, and I'm probably failing at that, but the point I'm trying to make is that when we put people in groups and we just assume that they are a certain way or that they treat people a certain way, that is what we are trying to get away from. That's what racism is based on, is putting people in groups and thinking of them in a negative way. And that is exactly what we're trying to prevent the teaching of in our schools. And yes, it did happen years ago, and maybe it still goes on, but what we're trying to do is get away from that. I mean, what we do know, if we're going to say the United States of America and the state of Georgia are fundamentally and systematically racist, the author is still allowing that to be taught in the schools, but you can't say it as a group. Yes, there are some laws out there that are systematically racist, and those are the ones we've got to get rid of. But we know that the Democrat Party years ago fought for slavery. We know the Democrat Party years ago fought for Jim Crow laws, but that doesn't mean these Democrats sitting here are racist, because I know they're not. I've served with them for 6 years, and I know they're not. They're not. But if I wanted to put it in a group, which is what we're trying to get away from, what the author is trying to get away from, that being taught in our schools and saying that one group is inferior to another group, that's wrong. And that is systematically wrong. And that is what we've got to break. That is the cycle we've got to break in this state. It doesn't matter what the color of your skin is. It doesn't matter your background. It doesn't matter what part of the state you come from. What matters is that you try to help your fellow man, and we want to teach that in the schools. We do want to learn from our history. Yes, we have a checkered past. There's no question about it, and there's nothing in this proposed bill that's prohibiting that from being taught. The only thing he's trying to do is get away from trying to put this group quotations around all of us, which is, I think he's accomplished. He's still got to work on some of the kinks and work with both sides of the aisle and work from citizens out there and figure it out. But you know, I think you're on the right track. And again, it's about the individual, and that's what we're trying to teach, not or what needs to be taught, and not that everybody is the same because of the color of your skin or because your gender or because of anything else like that. Am I somewhat accurate in that?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, Senator James,
Thank you very much,
you
Mr.
can
Chair.
put your microphone to you.
So thank you, Mr. Chair, and to Senator Hatch. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh, okay. Thank you. I have a concern about line 80 through 83. Really, on page 4. And it says that really you cannot prohibit the teaching of slavery. Now, that this won't prohibit it, but certainly there have to be some limitations, or otherwise there's no necessity for this bill. So can you tell me what those limitations are? Because I mean, I look at life through real glasses, not rose colored. So no matter how it's being said, facts are facts. So in the case, say, of slavery, can you not just say anymore that the slaves were stolen from the shores of Africa and they got in a yacht or something? No, they got thrown into boats, chained up, mistreated, not fed, whipped. And when they died, if they didn't make it, they threw them over into the ocean and slid somebody else in the place of those people. So how do you say that? What kind of limitations would you put on the real facts? Because life is not seen through rose-colored glasses up here. We have to look at the reality of it.
I agree 100%. Life is not looked at through rose-colored glasses, and I would not try to prevent the teaching of slavery or and the history that went behind.
But you said right here.
Oh, no, this says that this bill in no way prohibits.
But say it in a
curriculum
different
that-
way. But how can, okay, so tell me the limitation. How can you say something like that to teach? How can a teacher teach that
A teacher can't,
without the facts?
no, we're not trying to prevent the facts from being taught. I mean, a teacher, obviously age appropriate, and that's up to the curriculum and it's up to the teachers. And like I said, this actually says that this bill is not intended to prohibit the use of curriculum that addresses topics of slavery. So that would be a topic of slavery. And that's just clarifying that this bill in no way prohibits that. In no way prevents that from being taught.
But how do you say it then? What are the limitations? Because you're saying don't say anything to the young, to try to teach the children about discrimination and racism and all of that, when clearly that's what it was. Is it some other way to put it? I mean, we've learned, we grew up, we're okay. We try to work together and live together and like each other on other levels. But how can you leave that out? You know, what really happened out by saying that including topics related to the enactment and enforcement of laws resulting in such oppression, segregation, and discrimination. I think I'm interpreting this right, and
So
I don't understand how you could do that.
well, and that's exactly why we wanted to include that language in this bill, because we don't believe that you should prevent someone from talking about topics relating to the enactment and enforcement of laws relating to such oppression, segregation, and discrimination. This part of the bill is actually talking about what this bill is not intending to take out of curriculum. So this is talking about things that are still allowed, and we want, this bill does not change the way these things are taught.
What does it do then? This is what I mean, it's in here. So how would you say it according to what I'm reading here in this bill?
I think. Yes, sir.
I saw that too. I see that.
Okay, yeah. Nothing in this code section shall be construed to do any of the following. And so that's, this should not be construed to prohibit the teaching of slavery, racial or ethnic oppression, racial or ethnic segregation. We're not trying to prevent that.
Who's gonna monitor this and see who's saying what, when, where, and how? Is somebody gonna, say my child went to school and they were taught this, and get rid of the teacher, or how is it gonna be monitored?
So what we have, and with the bill now, and we think we will work more with school boards and superintendents and principals and everything. But right now, if you're a student of age, a parent, there's a list of people who would have standing and bring in a complaint. They would bring the complaint to the school. The school would handle the complaint. If the teacher or parent or student is not happy with the decision, there is an appeal process to the State Board of Education, and then it goes from there until the ultimate consequence. If for egregious non-compliance, would be a 10% cut in QBE for K through 12 and 10% for colleges as well.
One last thing, Mr. Chairman, and author of the bill, if you will yield one more question.
Yes, please.
One quick question.
Run out of time.
Oh, my goodness. Don't want to run out of time, but in that case, then I'll yield because I see other lights that's lit up right here, but I'll talk to you later.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Senator. Senator Halpern, did you have your?
Kind of piggybacking on what we were just talking about, I'm looking at your list of what constitutes divisive concepts, and specifically in G, an individual should feel discomfort, guilt, anguish, or any other form of psychological distress. I think that we can all agree that most of us have felt some distress at some times in our life, maybe even during hearings. And I'll just share, my parents grew up in Jim Crow, Mississippi, and they grew up on farms. And I was distressed the first time I learned about some of the history my grandparents had to go through. I was distressed when I learned about my parents going to segregated schools. And I was distressed when I learned what that meant. I cried the first time I saw Roots to see what happened to my people. And I would say that part of what our job should be in schooling is to teach our children how to think critically about what has happened. And though they may learn this most at home, to understand what it means in another person's shoes. So I'm going to say generally, possibly teach them some empathy. And so my question is, if a student feels distressed by the worst elements of our country's history, is that cause to strip away the school's funding?
I think I understand what you're saying with the question and teaching history, how you're supposed to teach. I think the divisive concept that we're trying to prevent is for a teacher to look at a student and say, because of the color of your skin, you should feel discomfort. You should feel guilt. You should feel anguish. And I understand, I'm sensitive to what you're saying, and we have a terrible past in this country. And I'm in no way trying to prevent that from being taught.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm trying to do is to prevent a teacher from saying that because of the color of your skin, you should feel that way.
One more question, or maybe two. Can you give any examples where that is happening, where students in Georgia, where students are being told because of their skin color, for example, that they are X or Y or Z in the way that it is framed in this bill?
Sometimes you can have proactive instead of reactive legislation. I have seen a couple true false tests that were administered or surveys that are administered in high schools. I haven't heard about it in elementary school, but if you're a white supremacist that goes in and is a substitute teacher, you shouldn't be able to teach that white people are superior. There's so many reiterations of this, and these are the type of divisive concepts that we're trying to prevent, because the future of Georgia is going to look a lot different than the past. The makeup of Georgia is going to look a lot different than the past. We're going to have to get along with each other, my children, my grandchildren, and why foster and implement these hateful, divisive concepts in a way, like I said, where you're taught that you should and you have and you will be certain ways, when I don't think that those, I just don't think those should be taught.
All right, Senator Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Hatchett, so I just want to get it right about what can a teacher say. Can you say a slave owner who who owned slaves were inherently racist?
You can say that a slave owner that
Can
owned
a-
slaves.
Right, can a teacher say that a slaveholder
Mhm.
were inherently racist?
I believe that it would be fair to say at the time that a slave owner was racist. Yes.
Right. Well, can you also say then an elected official who supported Jim Crow-ism is a racist?
That supported
Mhm.
that supported
Jim
yes.
Crow.
Yes.
Jim Crow laws is racist. And when we go back to page 2, line 28, what can a teacher say about the United States and racial issues?
I think. Well, sorry.
I'm saying those individuals who went to a foreign land and captured enslaved people, put them on a ship, chained and ankled, whipped, beat, raped, brought them over. They worked for no money. Can we say that those individuals are racist?
Absolutely.
So if the teacher can say all of that, what is the point of this legislation?
A teacher can say that there were in the past, the United States has been racist. In the past, the state of Georgia has been racist. They can teach now that there are racist, there could be racial laws. They could teach about that. But when you say the United States as a whole right now, Georgia as a whole right now, as the senator from the 28 said, in a group, that's the lessons that we're trying to prevent from being taught. In no way are we trying to prevent students and future generations from learning about the brutal circumstances that Africans were put in when they were brought over here. We're not trying to prevent the teaching of slavery. You know, I am of the belief that if you don't teach history, it can repeat itself, and it will. And that's not what we want to do.
Okay, well, final statement, Mr. Chairman. Are you familiar with the statement? And you've almost said it. You know, for people to prepare for its future, they must first understand their past.
That's right.
Mhm. So how can a people understand their past unless there's someone teaching them the past?
And the past can be taught.
If the past is taught, then the past is taught that this country was far different than what it is today. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
All right. We are running. Senator Anderson here.
Yes.
Okay, then I guess we will continue. Senator Anavitarte.
Senator Hatchett, let me ask you a question. I want to go back to, I guess it was a statement that Senator Jackson had made earlier. If most people learn racism at home and it's truly a learned behavior, then we don't need to teach that it's inherent in schools, right?
Correct.
Just want to make sure.
Okay, Senator Parent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to understand a little bit more, Senator Hatchett, about the impact of teaching about history as it relates to current events, you know, especially in light of the comments made about how history has to inform the present. So I was thinking about John Lewis's history, and I'm assuming schools could teach about John Lewis.
Yes.
Yes, and could they teach about his involvement in Bloody Sunday, the March on Washington, and the civil rights movement in the 60s?
So I know that we're going around this a lot, and the teachings about our history, the segregation, the laws that were put in place, the systematic racism in during the Jim Crow era, that's history that we're not trying to prevent. What we're trying to prevent are these divisive concepts that are outlined on page 2A or section A1, A through I. Those are the divisive concepts that we're trying to prevent. And I know that we can go down a million different rabbit holes about history and about, certain actors in history. And I am not trying to prevent the teaching of history.
So that's like a yes, you could talk about those things.
I think I've answered that. Yeah.
Well, okay, so that led to, the reason I went into that is because I had a question about how the history of someone like John Lewis might play into current events, and the history of the civil rights movement might play into current events that might be coursing through a society, and for which, we've traditionally held that teachers have a role in helping their kids think through, learn to think critically about, and come to an understanding about their place in the world by kind of guiding some of their education and discussion. And so, for example, with John Lewis, just in the last week or so of his life, he demonstrated his lifelong commitment to continuing the civil rights struggle and voting rights struggle forward in the United States, and attended a Black Lives Matter march on Washington. And at that time, he said, Emmett Till was my George Floyd. He was my Rayshard Brooks, Sandra Bland, and Breonna Taylor. Would schools be allowed to teach about John Lewis's recent activism in this ongoing quest for civil rights and equality?
Yes.
Would they be allowed to talk about
Yes,
George Floyd
of
or
course they
Breonna
would.
Taylor? How
Of
would
course
that
they
not
would.
be?
However, if you taught about it and you said, he is protesting something because of the color of your skin, you agree with what he's protesting. That's what we're trying to prevent.
But wait a minute, is someone done that?
We're trying to prevent it from happening. Of course.
But don't you think that you're wading into a lot of really confusing and vague things that can have a chilling effect and cause distress for teachers who are leaving the field in droves over something that you don't even saying is happening? I'm sorry.
This is
I didn't
an
mean to-
issue that has been obviously brought up to a number of us. There are instances of this. I've seen a couple surveys, how deep it goes, I'm not sure, but these are divisive concepts that we want to make sure stays out of our education system.
Okay.
Thank you.
Senator Dolzell?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator, for being here. I'm wondering if you could, and I know you're a smart lawyer, but, we talked about CRT, we've talked about divisive concepts. I think it all kind of is rooted in this idea of intersectionality. Is that a term you're familiar with? Or if it is, could you unpack intersectionality for us?
I'm sorry. Well, could you kind of
I'm
bring
a
me back
non-
into what you're leading me into?
Sure. Yeah. It's the concept that we're not individuals, right? It's the cultural Marxism that says that you fall into buckets of people, and regardless of your experience, the fact that you and I look the same, we're the same.
Mm-hmm.
We're not the same, right? It's the idea that the fact that Senator Parent and I look the same, that we're the same. We're not the same. Intersectionality teaches that all people adopt the construct of their racial identity, right? So would you agree that we do have examples in America, right? And a lot of what we do here in Georgia is to look at other states and see what other states are doing and either embrace it or prevent it, correct?
Correct.
So either in Georgia or in other states around America, could you point to examples of some of these divisive concepts being taught and maybe how it caused you or Senator Brass, as he was originally working on this language, to bring this language forward?
There have been a number of instances around the country. There's been instances in the state, like I said, and I wish I could get the survey that was showed to me the other day, but I'm happy to bring that in and kind of show what we have been seeing and what we're trying to prevent from being taught. And like I said in the very beginning, I'm happy to work with anybody in this room, happy to work with anybody in the chamber on either side to talk and try to reach a good spot with this bill. Once again, thank you for having the hearing today. I'm not sure when the next hearing will be, but between now and then, I'd like to talk to more people and try to decide the best course of action. And just thank you for your time today.
Well, I would encourage you to get with even the questions that are on this committee. I mean,
Yeah.
sit down. That's the purpose of a hearing, is so that
Exactly.
we can get this information out and just start the discussion.
If Mr. Chair, if ask the senator a couple more questions, unless you were done with this particular bill.
Well, we've got.
I didn't know if
five-
Senator
we
Anderson
got
was here yet or not.
5 minutes now.
Do you have
so I
more
don't
people
know.
waiting to ask questions?
Yes.
I'll yield,
Go-
okay.
no, Go ahead. Go ahead.
I'll yield my time.
Okay. Senator Evertardy.
Senator Hatchett, let me ask a quick question. Isn't it true that the point of this bill isn't for us to not teach history?
The point of the bill is, you're right, it's to prevent divisive concepts. It is not a bill trying to burn books or prevent historical things from being taught.
Would you not agree that the point is to prohibit telling elementary school age children, and I have one of them, that they're inherently racist, no matter their actions or their intentions, to basically avoid those kind of conversations?
Correct.
Thank you.
Senator James.
Thank you very much. I have another quick question here. Right now, every day in the Senate and in the House, members of the Georgia Legislative Black Caucus and other members are coming to the well for a point of personal privilege to have a Black History moment. And of course, you know, Black History started way back. It's been, I mean, history is history. But Carter G. Woodson back in 1933 wrote a book called The Miseducation of Negro. And then we realized the Negroes, Black people, were left out of the history books. And so then when they started putting accomplishments of Black people in the books, it was watered down. And it's still watered down now. And so my biggest question is, you know, I know that they considered us less than so much percent of a man or a woman back then, Black people in the United States, even when my great grandfather was born, you know, and lived. So how, I still don't understand why we can't talk about it the way it really is and not try to water over it anymore, but maybe even have a committee. And I had introduced one that didn't even come out, they didn't even see the light of day, but it was to form a committee to talk about racial issues in the state of Georgia and how we could resolve them and how we could have a change of mindset with children coming up so they would not have to know about a whole lot of discrimination from their first teachers, which is of course their parents. So, I mean, could we not drop that bill and then pick up one that'll be a committee where we could talk about this on an ongoing basis until we come up with a real solution or with some ideas? That's my question to you.
You're talking, can you drop a bill that?
I already dropped one. You can have it. Y'all can put your name on it. It's not gonna see the light of day with my name on it. But you know, we can rewrite it or tweak
Well,
it.
I
But
definitely.
it just asked for reconciliation is what it was asking for. And the only way to do it was to put partisan committee together and experts on racial issues and actually have 4 meetings and try to discuss it so that we could at least, I think that's where we have to start. We have to start somewhere else before we can go up to looking at the things that you're talking about. We need to talk about the real problem and admit it's a problem. So I'm asking you, would you be willing to look at maybe a committee to study this and really study it, not to just water over again?
You know, like you said, I don't think history should be watered down. I agree with you there. You know, we're talking about divisive concepts. We're not talking about or historical concepts with this piece of legislation, but I'm happy to talk with you further about a separate piece of legislation.
All right. I just realized that Senator Anderson has arrived. So we will end the discussion on this bill today. And we will move on to Senate Bill 15. I appreciate you, Senator, for being here today. I appreciate the senators on this committee for the discussion and input to the discussion. And I hope the discussion stays mature and responsible as we go forward, as we discuss these issues. And appreciate you being
Thank
here today. Thank you, Senator.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Anderson. Either one. Senator Anderson, will you please present your Senate Bill 15?
Absolutely.
I don't know if that one's working.
Yes, this is working. Absolutely. Senate Bill 15, and I am working from LC 490086.
That's a different LC than we have. We have LC 490278.
0278. Okay, well, I'll give you the summary of, it's probably an amendment. Okay. Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah,
we,
this, yeah, 0278. Yes, I'm sorry.
and just to let you know, we are out of time, but
I'm
I'm gonna
gonna
let
be
you
very
present your
brief.
bill real fast, and then we will bring this bill back to
I'll be very brief.
another date.
Yeah, it's the same thing. It's just, I amended it just a little bit. So LC 490278. And so what this bill does is it will allow an opportunity to create a curriculum. Right now, African-American studies and Black history is a part of the state list of courses that can be taken in high school. But this is to create a curriculum centered around what should be taught and what could be taught. And it's pretty much Black history facts, inventions, publications, patents, and the history of African-American contributions. The goal is to allow education agencies to devote more resources to promote the growing ethnic studies network, to partner with community-based organizations, coalitions, and colleges to expand access to course materials and promote dual credit options for students who wish to take ethnic studies courses. It will allow an exploration of incentives and creating a certificate designated on a graduation diploma that highlights students' work toward culturally sustaining cultural awareness. I'm sorry. Additionally, we want to explore creating a database of colleges that have a high quality ethnic studies program and encourage dual enrollment programs with local high schools. And looking at the stats of Georgia, the population, our country and our state are becoming more diverse. Populations of people of color have increased to about 50% according to the census data. This prepares our students and our state to embrace and understand the contributions of Black people in the United States and Georgia history.
All right. Do I have any questions? I'm looking at the bill and on Senate Bill, this is LC 490278. That's what you've got now.
Yes, I do.
On the line 53, just to clarify that this is just adding to what's already in code as far
Yes.
as what's already in this section,
Yes,
just to add this section 4, which is the history of Black Americans, including the history of Black people before the political conflicts that led to the development of slavery, the passage to America, the enslavement experience, the anti-slavery movement, and contributions of Black people to American society. Is that correct?
that is correct. And if I may add, Mr. Chairman, this bill actually was presented January of last year. So this has nothing to do with the other conflict that
Yes, ma'am.
people are feeling.
This is Senate
But
Bill
this was
15.
Senate
which
Bill
means it
15, which
dropped in
was,
2021.
Yep, 21. This was dropped in 2021.
All right, we have a question. I'm gonna just take a couple of questions, then because we got to wrap up, but who's number 4? Okay, Senator Dozal.
Thank you, Good afternoon, Senator Anderson. Thank you for being here. You mentioned a couple of things I just don't see in the bill. So is there a version of this bill? You mentioned certification, dual enrollment, a couple other things. Is there a version of this we don't have yet?
Well, no, that's just the idea centered around introducing a curriculum. I'm sorry,
I got you.
introducing the coursework that will be included in the coursework.
And this is a nit and it's a small thing, but is there a reason why yours is number 4 as opposed to being just letter F underneath anti-slavery, civil rights, women's suffrage, contributions of immigrants to American society and the history of Native American population, and then yours would be an additional letter? Maybe it seems like it might fit better there. I'm not being critical at all, but I'm saying it might fit better there as opposed to a standalone element, perhaps.
Actually, you're critical of legislative counsel and not myself. So
Fair
that's who
enough.
drafted the bill.
Fair enough.
I asked for it and that's what they gave me.
Yeah. So I
But
don't
it's
know if it might
because it
fit
is a
better.
separate. Civil rights movement is a civil rights movement. See, that's why we need this education class.
Gotcha.
Civil rights movements, but then Black history and the contributions, inventions, publications, patents, those are different.
I gotcha. Could you, and because I was missing, I was scrambling to see if there was a different bill. Can you reiterate the certification piece that you were talking about as well as dual enrollment?
So yes, it was pretty much centered around something on their diploma that says that they studied African-American history or ethnic studies in order to propel or launch them into, maybe that's the career that they want to pursue. And that would help with that.
Gotcha. Thank you.
All right, Senator, you have no other questions right now. So being that we are 5 minutes past the hour.
I
said-
appreciate the time and I
Well,
thank you,
I'm
Mr.
glad I
Chairman.
saw you come in your bright yellow jacket and your precious smile.
Thank
but-
you. And thank you, members of the committee.
Having no other business for this committee today, appreciate everyone being here. And like I said, with these bills, we'll come back at a later time and we will make sure that everyone gets the opportunity from the public to address those bills at that time. But today, I want to make sure that this committee had ample time to go through these 2 bills. Thank you very much and have a nice day. We are adjourned.